About 1 year ago around this time, Season 2 of Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal began airing on Adult Swim. If you somehow don't know what Primal is and you still clicked on this video, Primal is an adult animated action series made by legendary creator Genndy Tartakovsky. It follows a caveman named Spear and a T-Rex named Fang as they navigate a primitive and brutal world. Also, about a year ago, in anticipation for Season 2, I made a recap review style video covering Season 1 of this absolutely amazing show. At the time, it was really exciting for me. Not only because I'm the self-proclaimed biggest fan of Gendy's other masterpiece, Samurai Jack, but also because I initially totally missed out on Primal back when it came out in 2019. At the time of filming this right now, that first Primal video is one of, if not the most viewed video on my entire channel. And I am so fucking grateful for that. That was by far the most ambitious video I had made up to that point. And to see it get so much attention and the reception that it did meant so much to me. Honestly, however, at the time, even after that video blew up a little, I wasn't quite sure if I was gonna make a video on Season 2. I just didn't know what Season 2 was gonna hold, and more importantly, I absolutely did not want to just shit out a lackluster video right when Season 2 ends, sacrificing actually thinking through my opinions just to catch the tail end of the hype train. Nah, that's just not me. However, after about half of Season 2 came out, I kinda knew that I wanted to make a video on it eventually. And by the time the season ended, let's just say there was a lot to digest. So that's exactly what I did. I let it digest, I rewatched it a few times, and now, a whole goddamn year later, I'm finally ready to go over it all. In this video, I will be going through each episode, giving the basic plot points and summary, plus anything I picked up on, my thoughts, my opinions. I know this kinda goes without saying, but I'm going to insist on it nonetheless. This video kinda trusts that you have already seen Season 1, or at least know what happens. And more importantly, this video contains spoilers for the entirety of the Primal series, especially the newest season, Season 2. So if you plan on jumping into the series spoiler-free, here's your stop sign, buddy. But if you do decide to watch further, I do believe that this show is really an experience to watch, especially regarding all the action and emotion in these episodes. And I honestly think that you'll still get a ton out of the series, even if you choose to watch this video first. And with that, what better way to start talking about Primal Season 2 than the beginning? The first episode of this season is titled Sea of Despair. Yeah, don't you worry, the episode titles go just as hard as last season's. It opens up exactly where we left off, with Spear and Fang watching helplessly as their new friend Mira is captured and on a ship sailing into the distance. Spear's sadness quickly boils over into anger as he jumps into the water and attempts to swim after her before being promptly washed back ashore. Spear then sees a leaf floating in the water, and neurons begin firing in his primitive caveman brain. He quickly begins knocking down a tree, and Fang catches on and helps him collect logs. Quite impressively, after a day and night of working, they're able to set sail by morning. Ironically, one thing they most certainly don't have is an actual sail. Yeah, they're sorta just drifting around in the fucking ocean. The only means of propulsion or steering is one of them hanging off the boat and paddling. Just about the entirety of this episode takes place on this raft. We see as they face hunger, exhaustion, and even a run-in with what seems to be a megalodon shark, who ends up tragically destroying their raft. In the climax of the episode, the duo narrowly escape the massive shark after Spear stabs it from within its mouth and then directly in its eye. But the two are then separated by a series of massive waves. Fang then washes ashore somewhere and immediately begins searching for Spear. This episode shows a lot of determination from our main characters. Navigating and traveling the vast ocean probably has to be the most daunting task they've undertaken, yet they did it without hesitation to save their friend. The next episode is called Shadow of Fate. It once again picks up directly where we left off, with Fang on the beach, unsure of what to do next. You're going to notice that a lot of the episodes of this season tend to bleed into each other. Unlike Season 1 that was very episodic with short time jumps between episodes and premises that can be swapped around in the viewing order, Season 2 takes a different approach. This season is a little more serialized, which is just a fancy way to say that many episodes come together to tell one overarching story. And I really like that about this season. It makes sense that now that there's another objective in the picture for our protagonists other than simply surviving, the show would pivot to focusing more on that. After waiting a while for Spear to hopefully wash up as well, Fang hears a sound behind her and begins investigating. She gets baited by a pile of rocks and moss that looks like Spear before coming face to face with another T-Rex. Immediately, Fang braces for a fight, probably somewhat due to the fact that this T-Rex kinda resembles the one that killed her children all that time ago. Despite this, the other T-Rex is not hostile and Fang stands down. We are then shown a pretty cool tracking shot of a fucking flying squirrel glide from one end of the map to another, landing directly next to Spear, confirming that the two are in fact on the same landmass at least. In the remainder of this episode, Spear is rescued by other humans and nursed back to health, while Fang competes with before ultimately developing a sort of relationship with the red T-Rex. Spear eventually wakes up in a village and attempts to escape, but is then talked down by a member of the tribe. It is at this time that we get a good look at the people of this village. They are very Scottish-esque and a lot more civilized than we are used to seeing in the series. Over the time that Spear spends there, he becomes more trusting of them, but does not seem to feel he belongs there. At one point, he even approaches a wolf and seems to equate himself closer to it than to any of the human beings. At the end of this episode, the two worlds collide when Fang's new boyfriend walks his ass into the village and starts massacring the residents. A pretty complex little standoff then ensues, in which Spear stops the humans from hurting Fang, and Fang stops the other T-Rex from hurting Spear, but also stops Spear from hurting the T-Rex. It really shows how far the two have come since the beginning of this series. Despite Spear finding other humans and Fang finding a new love interest, neither one of them allows themselves to conform back completely with their own species. They still care about each other. Sadly, however, Fang's peacekeeping efforts are a little in vain since Spear decides to go in for the kill anyway. A fight that he very much loses, and is only saved when Fang delivers a fucking slow motion double leg kick, unknowingly sending her new companion to his untimely fate as a dinosaur kebab. It is not until then that Spear realizes the big picture. Spear and Fang then leave the village, as the final shot of the episode focuses in on a nice bit of foreshadowing. Episode 3 is titled Dawn of Man. Not a lot happens in this episode until the end, but it's definitely important downtime after the insanity of last episode. It opens on Spear and Fang still clearly working through the death of the red T-Rex. Fang likely filled with grief and anger over his death, and Spear feeling the guilt of being the catalyst that led to it. Spear does what he can to show Fang he is sorry. They seem to make peace with it the best they can, and they decide to take refuge in a cave from the pouring rain. Once inside, they start a fire, and Spear lights a torch to explore deeper within. It's there that he discovers cave paintings, revealing that other cave-dwelling humans once lived in this cave, but have since migrated. Spear seems pretty mesmerized at how in-depth these paintings are. It's almost like an entire family or group's history was all captured on these walls. He eventually comes across some handprints and compares his own to theirs. His hand is far more large. This may seem like another throwaway moment of Spear feeling empathy for these fellow humans, but I think it ties much closer in with an overarching piece of Spear's character development that we've actually already briefly touched on. I believe Spear is a primitive human who is quickly watching the world around him move forward. More specifically, I think Spear is an example of a Neanderthal. And all the people he is encountering, including Mira herself, are more akin to Homo sapiens or modern-day humans. This explains his reaction here because Neanderthals were quite literally built different. They were less delicate, less precise. They were shorter and a lot thicker to survive and fight. So, literally Spear in a nutshell. Throughout this season, we see Spear encounter more civilized humans, and there always seems to be implications of him feeling he doesn't fit with them. I touch on it a lot later in this video, but I think this conflict within Spear is one of the most interesting recurring themes within this show. Anyway, that night, Spear looks up to the moon and attempts to do the same prayer that Mira used to do. Although I think the purpose is a bit lost on him, I don't think Spear quite understands religion yet. And later that night, they are attacked by Viking warriors riding fucking bears. Yes, you heard me correctly. Goddamn bears. Spear and Fang do make fairly quick work of them, but as the last man prepares for his final stand, Spear notices a scorpion symbol on his shield. The same symbol that Mira had branded on the back of her bald-ass head and that was on the sails of the men that took her. Spear says her name to him, but of course the soldier has no clue who the hell she is, and all he sees is an absolute maniac and his bloodthirsty pet dinosaur. Understandably, he hauls ass the fuck out of there, but in his retreat catches his fucking pinky toe on a rock and flies onto his ass, allowing our duo to catch up to him. He makes a pretty good last-ditch effort, all things considered. He is up against a damn T-Rex after all. Spear then picks up his sword, which, side note, Spear having a sword is so badass, and they are on their way to find the rest of the Scorpion people, and by extension, Mira. And when they do, Spear tells Fang to stay behind as he sneaks in to save Mira, which he does extremely easily actually. Like, for being intimidating warriors and cold-hearted slavers, I'm surprised they can't afford a single fucking lookout for their camp. Within the makeshift slave dungeon hut, Spear reunites with Mira in a very sweet moment, and the two attempt to lead all the people in captivity to freedom after Mira insists on it. But nearly out of the village, they hear growling in the distance. Something bad is coming. And that's the end of episode 3. Episode 4 is titled The Red Mist, and it's my absolute favorite episode of the season. It picks up directly after the cliffhanger of episode 3, with a legion of warriors on bears returning from their patrols and coming face to face with our protagonists. The slaves all drop to their knees, even Mira, but Spear holds his ground. The warriors have no earthly idea who this cave person is, but they do know one thing for certain. He has one of their swords, and he likely didn't take it peacefully. As Spear braces for a fight he can't win on his own, Fang emerges from the forest and promptly falls through one of their fucking roofs. And from there, the seemingly endless bloodshed starts. It cannot be understated how much gruesome top-tier action is in this episode. Like, holy shit. All the kills are equal parts brutal, creative, and downright hilarious sometimes. This one's one of my favorites, by the way. The entire village quickly rallies every able body to fight, even the children. This warrior woman and her son being the most notable. The mother sends her son with a bow to help take down Spear as she goes for Fang. A target that is 20 times her size and, a fucking T-Rex. She actually starts off pretty strong with a solid axe throw, but her second attack immediately puts her in, this position. On a even more tragic note, her son also bites the dust after a stretch where Spear attempts juggling fending off oncoming hordes of warriors with passively subduing the boy, which ultimately ends with Spear tossing the boy away from him and his soft, underdeveloped head right into an unforgiving rock. Spear then jumps onto Fang's back, and the namesake of this episode rolls in, the Red Mist. Within this mysterious red mist, Spear and Fang absolutely annihilate the entire rest of the village. I love this aspect of the episode so much because very often in Season 1, the titles would allude to the threat that Spear and Fang were facing, like the Night Feeder or the Ape Men. So it's easy to assume that the Red Mist would be some mystic thing that interferes with the fight, but rather it's a clever way of turning that trope on its head. The coverage provided from the Red Mist allows them to massacre the remaining combatants. The only threat here is Spear and Fang. They have become the monsters lurking in the darkness. The episode then cuts to two characters on a boat, a man and his son sailing under the scorpion sail with freshly captured slaves. After docking, they quickly know something is wrong, only to find their entire village dead. Spear, Fang, and Mira had escaped on a boat and left no survivors. The two immediately rush to find the bodies of two people in particular, the mother and son from earlier, for they are the other half to their family. The father and son painstakingly bury every single person in the village and free the slaves they had just brought in, showing that although how unforgivable and absolutely evil the tribe's slavery empire was, it could have been purely a business for them, or my theory, more of an obligation they had to fulfill. But I'll get more into that later. Lastly, the two conduct a traditional-style Viking funeral for their fallen family members and do one of the most badass suit-up montages ever. I mean, look at these motherfuckers. They then set sail once more, but now it's in search of revenge. Okay, now we're picking up steam. In 4 episodes, Spear and Fang have braved an ocean, found love, found civilization, lost love, saved Mira, burned an entire city to the ground, and sent a random Viking and his son into their revenge arc. I don't know about you, but I'm excited, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Hold up, what? What was that? Oh, okay. Yeah, episode 5 takes us on a bit of a detour, I guess. A bit of a controversial one, in fact. The community was a bit split on it when it came out. But nonetheless, it's a detour that I will very much stick my neck out for. It's actually become my second favorite episode of the entire season. It is called The Primal Theory, and it takes place all the way in the year 1890 in England, marking the first time we have ever gotten an exact date or location in this entire series. Upon starting this episode, we see a carriage arriving at a massive mansion. A butler answers the door and a gentleman walks in, going directly into a room containing 4 other men and wastes no time pouring himself a drink. But these true Brexit geezers aren't just here to drink. They are here for knowledge. More specifically in this case, to debate a theory that is relevant to the primal universe as a whole. To break it down as simply as I can, this younger gentleman named Charles explains his theory that although humans have evolved not only physically, but also mentally and socially, that primitive man that we once were is still in us in some way, and all it takes is some extreme catalyst to cause modern humans to revert to their primal form. And this guy named Darlington, whose house they're currently having a sleepover at, basically counters with, no, humans are too developed, and nothing can force our progress backward, and also Charles is a fucking dumbass. But right as Darlington hits Charles with a roast so devastating that I don't even know what the fuck he's talking about.
Well then, we must watch over Blakely's cakes.
The butler shows the constable in. The constable came specifically to warn them of an inmate that escaped from the asylum up the road. He describes him as a disturbed madman and tells them to stay inside for their own safety. To which they respond with more jokes targeted at Charles that the constable does not find all that amusing. They immediately go back to arguing about Charles's theory before hearing a window shatter upstairs and the butler is sent to check on it. All seems fine until blood literally starts dripping through the floorboards above them. Upon investigation, they find the madman, who had broken through the window, killed the butler, and was then gnawing on his flesh. Despite their best efforts of evading and even retaliating against the monster, they are slowly picked off one by one until it's just Darlington and Charles left. They are eventually able to turn the tide and corner the madman. In the final standoff, Charles is injured and it's all up to Darlington to face this beast with no modern weapons to help him. He ends up grabbing a spear, ripping off his shirt,
Oh no, he's hot!
and proceeds to kill the madman using some absolutely brutal tactics, ending it off Samurai Jack style, which immediately gains my respect. And the episode then ends with a big "I told you so" from Charles. This is because the events of the episode basically proved his theory after all. Not only does the madman's existence at all act as an irrefutable example of a human devolved into savagery, but he also acts as the catalyst for Darlington to revert to his primal instincts in order to kill him. This episode also has some interesting implications for a theory that I heard a lot of people mention in the comment section of my original video. That theory being that this show is not set in the past as we might expect, but rather in the future. More specifically, a post-apocalyptic future in which all technology was destroyed and mankind was forced back into caveman times. This is a pretty fun and actually plausible theory that this episode almost directly hints at. It's also worth mentioning that this episode, with its time jump and all, was a bit divisive. Some love it like me for the premise and how absolutely insane it is, and some people just hate it, I assume because it makes British people canon in the Primal universe. All jokes aside, the time jump did cause some whiplash and took us on a detour away from the main story, but damn, I'm so happy this episode exists. The next episode is called Vidar, the name of the Norse god of vengeance. Basically, in the beginning of this episode, the gang is simply healing up after the battle at the Viking village. But it's not long after they recover that the father and son catch up with them, boarding their ship and starting a fight. A fight that ends in a stalemate for the time being after the two groups are separated. Safe for now, Fang begins acting erratically, building a nest of some sort, leading to a massive reveal. Fang is pregnant. Meanwhile, the father and son tend to their wounds, and the father sees a vision of a demon in his dreams that night. I do have some theories about this character, but we'll get there. Anyway, Fang lays her eggs, which causes Spear to do this for some reason, which I love. And then they are attacked once again by the father and son, this time riding these bird creatures, which doesn't end all that well for them, directly resulting in the father taking the worst tumble in history, and the son doing the Black Widow challenge and plummeting headfirst onto a rock, dying instantly. The next episode is titled The Colossus? Colossus? I think that's how you say it. Colossus? The Colossus. And surprisingly is actually the first in a 3-episode arc. Instead of distinguishing between these 3 episodes, I'm just going to go through all of them in one go, as condensed as I possibly can. First off, the father wakes up briefly before passing away, I think. He sees angels coming to get him, but is then literally dragged to hell, where he comes face to face with the demon from his dreams. A Satan-like character that looks kind of like a coup if he had zero sense of humor. There is some speculation that I saw that this guy is responsible for the black liquid in season 1. You know, the black liquid we saw used by the ape men and possibly the Night Feeder. Probably the 2 most overpowered things we've seen in the series. I think that theory is likely true, but my personal theory as to who exactly this guy is also comes from season 1. I think this may be the guy who Mira drew in the dirt at the end of season 1 when describing the people that took her. In my first video, I said it must be some sort of warlord, but with the benefit of hindsight, it very well could just be a catch-all drawing to say Vikings. But after seeing this guy for the first time, I just immediately thought of that drawing. I think it's probably just the horns. But either way, I think the bond between the scorpion people and this being is much more intertwined than we think. I believe that the Scorpion people made a deal with this guy. More specifically, I think they were tasked with capturing slaves for him. Think about it. Those slaves weren't really doing anything for the Scorpion people that we could see. No farms, no agriculture, no jobs for them to do. And conveniently, after the remaining slaves are set free, this demon begins haunting the father and even drags him down to face him, like he's the last one left to pay his people's debt. But you know, that's just my theory. Basically, the demon reveals to the father that he has his son's soul hostage, and he wants him to go kill Spear and Fang for him, for some reason. The father obviously agrees. I mean, he was trying to do that anyway. And the demon turns him into a little baby demon guy. Back to our favorite trio. They set sail once again, now transporting some very valuable cargo. Sadly, nothing can go right for too long in this ruthless world, and they find themselves face to face with a literal floating city, the occupants of which waste no time boarding our protagonist's boat. The people seem very Egyptian-esque and have a lot of soldiers. Despite this, Spear and Mira hold off their first wave of troops as Fang stays huddled around her eggs, protecting them. Then, inevitably, the second wave hits, and this absolute unit of a man steps out and immediately sends Spear flying. Despite them all fighting like hell, even Fang, they are all taken prisoner, with one of Fang's eggs being destroyed in the process, and the leader of the Egyptian people, this woman, taking the other two as leverage. While imprisoned, it is revealed that the big warrior is also a prisoner to these people, and only fights for them because they have leverage on him in the form of his daughter. Now, I remember there were a lot of theories that I saw regarding this guy back when this episode first aired. Mainly speculation that he was microdosing the black liquid, and that was the source of his strength and size. Which you'll see if you watch this arc is just not true. Rather, I believe it is much more likely that he and his people are probably just greatly inspired by the race of giants that can be found in the Bible. The next morning, we are shown exactly why Spear and Fang were kept alive. They are sent out on a battlefield, expected to fight in a conquest waged by the Egyptian kingdom. They're simply reduced to mere weapons used to further the wealth and power of their captors. They end up fighting many battles in order to ensure the safety of Mira and Fang's eggs. Rinse and repeat, battle after battle, war after war. The cycle eventually ends when they come across a race of peaceful people. They offer what they have and refuse to fight, but the Egyptian queen still forces the giant to massacre them. And he has to do it, or his daughter will surely be harmed. After that, back on the boat, Spear finds a way to escape his cell and attacks the queen and her soldiers, allowing Mira to grab the eggs, the giant's daughter, and make a break for it. The three of them do inevitably get surrounded as Fang's eggs hatch and the baby dinosaurs call out. Calls that are heard by Fang, who springs into action, but even with her help, they are all recaptured and set for execution. The dirty work once again placed on the shoulders of the giant. But this time, instead of following orders, he frees them, and together they are able to fend off the soldiers, free the giant's people who were rowing this damn boat the whole time, and quite literally overthrow the queen. From there, the main gang, with the addition of 2 cute baby T-Rexes, sail away as the giants take control of the Egyptian ship. The final scene of this arc shows the giant and his daughter sharing some water as a familiar figure looms closer. And with that, we've made it to episode 10. And much like the finale of the first season, this episode changes everything. It's called Echoes of Eternity and starts with something that I never thought we'd get to see. A flashback to Spear's childhood. We get to see Spear as a teenager as well as his father. In this flashback, we see a group of saber-toothed tigers attack and ravage their group. Spear and his father fight valiantly, but sadly, Spear's father is killed by the tigers. Spear does tap into some insane ape rage after that, however, and ends up clutching up the 1v3. Quick snap back to reality. Intentionally or unintentionally, the gang actually find their way back to the very same place Mira was initially taken from, and they eventually run into civilization. Mira is finally home after all that she went through. And Spear and Fang are pretty much welcomed into the tribe as well. That night they hold a ritual or celebration, once again praying to the moon. At first, Spear seems happy and goes along with it, but then something changes. I think he once again self-consciously feels he just doesn't belong here. He makes the decision to ultimately leave the celebration, and that night, for the entire night, Spear takes to making cave paintings on the wall. But not just any cave paintings, paintings that depict his entire life. Everything from his childhood, losing his family, meeting Fang, meeting Mira, their journey, and ultimately ending with drawings of Mira with her people, Fang with her children, and Spear all alone a far distance away from them. He is sort of the odd one out now, and it only reinforces his feelings that he just doesn't belong. Too human to incorporate himself into Fang's new family, and too underdeveloped to join these people. But as Spear struggles with this crisis of his, one final threat rears its ugly head. The Viking father turned fire demon approaches. Without hesitation, Spear and Fang go to fight him, but they have one hell of a hard time doing it since, he's made of fire. Fang ends up getting hurt, and Spear gets pissed. The demon then attempts to basically incinerate Spear on the spot, but he fucking fights through it for God's sake, tackling the demon off the mountain, surely causing it some damage. The demon then briefly reverts to his human form before being dragged back to hell. But Spear is not exactly unharmed. He is in critical condition from his burns with little chance of survival. Mira spends his final moments with him, and after looking one last time at the drawing on the wall, they do a little something, if you catch my drift. The very end of the episode takes place after a massive time jump, showing us a scene of Spear and Mira's daughter riding one of Fang's now matured children. And that's the end of Season 2. Now, first off, before I dive into how I felt overall about this season, I kind of have to address the elephant in the room. That ending. I understand that it kind of was a out of left field twist, and some of you probably loved it, and some of you probably hated it. Personally speaking, I do like it. Sure, I'll be the first to admit that, I wasn't ready for Spear to die. Me and surely many of you wanted to see many, many more seasons starring our favorite duo, Spear and Fang. But that doesn't make it a bad ending. Despite how fucking weird and uncomfortable this scene is, I do think this is a fitting end for Spear's character. Throughout the whole season, we were shown hints that Spear was struggling with feeling like the world was leaving him behind. Mira returned to her people, Fang had 2 new children, and despite being welcomed with open arms by both of them, he just no longer felt like he fit. But despite this, without hesitation, he sacrifices himself to protect them and their new lives, because he still truly cared about them. They were the only family he had left. And I honestly cannot think of a more perfect way to end this era of the show. The very reason Spear and Fang bonded in the first place was out of a shared grief that they had after they both tragically lost their families. So I find it so poetic that it ends with the new children of these two together. And with all that out of the way now, I want to quickly and briefly say just how much I fucking loved this season. I loved the action. I think it was as good, if not better, than last season. I loved the Primal Theory episode and how it kind of puts into question the entire timeline of the series. God, I loved the Colossus 3-part arc. That was so fucking cool. Holy shit. And finally, I kind of loved the ending, even if it marks the end of Spear and Fang's journey as we know it. I don't believe, however, that this is the end of Primal. I think it's just the end of an era. I believe Genndy said in an interview that it might be pivoting into more of an anthology series, which sounds incredibly intriguing. And even more excitingly, he recently did an interview where he was hyping Season 3 up. I honestly think that Primal as a whole is one of the greatest pieces of animated media that we've gotten in recent memory. The more I rewatch these 2 seasons, the more I just fall in love with it. It's nothing short of an absolute masterpiece. And once again, now more than ever, I can't wait to see where it goes next. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching this video and making it this far. This video was a year in the making and a ton of work, and I really, really hope that you enjoyed it. Definitely leave your thoughts on Season 2 in the comments below, whether you loved it like me, or you weren't crazy about it, or you fucking hated it. I'd still love to hear your opinion. As for more content related to Primal, I don't think there's going to be too much unless I get a really good idea. I do have one other Primal video in active development right now, but it's taking me an ungodly amount of time to get it done. But definitely keep an eye out. It still might be a little while, but once you see it, you'll understand why. Oh yeah, there's also that new show out by Genndy. At the time of filming this, I've only seen the first episode. I've just been so busy. But I'm definitely liking it so far. It's pretty interesting. I'm not going to say expect a review on it, but if it really blows me away and I have a lot to talk about, I might make a review on season 1 in the next coming months. If I don't, I'll get to it eventually. It's kind of my goal to eventually review everything that Genndy makes. I think that's just kind of a fun series. And it's an excuse for me to watch some cool things I haven't watched and talk about some interesting things. But with that, I hope you have an absolutely amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one.
I want some cheeseburgers just to eat. I'm talking ketchup, my nigga mustard on the beat. You gotta put a lot of lettuce, please, because I like to have a lot of grease. I remember eating outside with my whole team. Now a nigga gotta stay home cause of quarantine.
That's where I thought you got your ankles.